space and technology. In one.
Hello world. Welcome to our brand new series, The Cosmic Code.
This is the first episode, which is Simulating Space in Retro Technology. Simulating space on your computer is just you running a one-to-one copy of space that has been fed by data from scientists and satellites alike. You're just viewing space on your computer. There are many use cases to simulate space on a computer. First of all, scientists use simulations of space in order to carry out different experiments and equations that relate to space and stuff such as black holes, collisions, etc., right? So what else? Well, you can use it to explore space without having to actually go to space, right? Again, it's a one-to-one copy depending on the software you use.
Now that we know what space simulation software really is, why do we need it? What purpose does it serve? Space, as we know, is vast, unknown, and very dangerous. Every attempt at exploration requires to be very precise. Even the smallest mistake can cause a loss of lot of lives or a lot of money. So rather than actually going to space and testing the environment around you, simulation is a safer practice. Now, for example, you want to ask a girl out or a guy out or a horse, dog, femboy, whatever, you wouldn't directly go up unless you're completely confident. You would first replay the conversation in your head or try to imagine scenarios to lead to a better outcome. That is simulation, and that is required for every space mission. Space simulation can be used in a variety of ways. 1. To detect motion in space. Space simulations are used to find out about the orbiting of satellites, planet movements, and rocket trajectories. They basically tell us where things need to go. 2. They can be efficiently used to plan launch, fuel usage, and re-entry. And third, and its most important function, is to learning through visualization about the solar system, about stars, and about galaxies. They are great methods of education. And 4. They can be used to predict and analyze scenarios such as satellite collisions, to track space debris movement and the success probability of a mission. Now we've arrived at the most important part, so make sure all holes are open for this. Now that we know what space simulation is and why it is used, let us understand the principles of it. What lies at the heart of the matter? Well, 4 things. 1. Gravity. We know the formula F is equal to G m1 m2 by r square, which basically is the foundation of all mathematical principles. What it tells us is 1. How strongly objects attract each other, and from that we can conclude why planets orbit stars and why satellites just don't fall immediately. 2. Motion, which depends on the Newton's laws of motions. From that we can understand that objects keep moving unless they are acted upon. So naturally that would mean rockets need thrust in order to change direction. 3. Numerical simulation. It breaks the mission into several steps, so which makes it possible for us to recalculate position and velocity several times. So the key idea behind space simulation is that software just doesn't guess. It calculates the future step by step using physics laws. But what would be the point of learning so much about simulations if you don't actually get to try one yourself?
Alright guys, it's Tharun Karthick again. Welcome back. So right now, we are going to be talking about simulating space software on retro technology, right? So what is the most retro piece of technology that people resonate with today? If you think about it, it's Windows XP. Well, what is Windows XP? Windows XP was a piece of revolutionary software, right? Microsoft wanted to move on from the 9X kernel to the NT kernel, but not just commercially, but also for home users, right? So the last release of Windows was divided into two: Windows 2000 for office users and Windows Millennium Edition for home users. The thing is, Millennium Edition ran on the 9X kernel, the same kernel that was used in Windows 95, Windows 98, the DOS-based kernel. But Windows 2000 ran on the NT kernel, which used the new technology features, right? So Windows XP was supposed to be released as two, Odyssey and Neptune, right? But then they merged it into one project known as Whistler, Windows codename Whistler. So the final product is a combination of the features from both a 9X computer and an NT computer under the newly released NT 5.1 kernel, right? So this NT 5 release is known as Windows XP. They didn't want to name it as Windows NT 5, just like Windows NT 4.0, 3.1, 3.0. So Windows XP stands for Windows Experience. They wanted you to experience computing in a new era. That's why you have a new theme, right? Computers back in the 1980s. So computers back in the 1980s used a theme known as the classic theme, right? So they wanted to shift from something retro to something new, something that people haven't experienced yet. That's why companies like Apple and Microsoft have been experimenting with skeuomorphism. So what is skeuomorphism? It's this revolutionary piece of technology where you create software that looks, realistic. So as you can see, the icons, the theme, everything looks really different, like toyish, straight out of Toy Story. And you can see the icons look really realistic. It's an exaggeration, by the way, but yeah, you get the point. So this is skeuomorphism in practice, Windows XP. And Apple released OS X with skeuomorphism as well. So moving on to the space aspect of the video, right now we are going to be installing a piece of software known as Celestia. So Celestia is one of the many selection of software that you can use in order to explore the different dynamics of space and space engineering, right? So the other software that we have, read about is Sandbox, the Universe Sandbox, by the way. Kerbal Space Exploration, I think. Kerbal Space Program, sorry. So Kerbal Space Program is actually a game that I've played back when I was younger. That's why I, forgot the name. It was slightly hazy, but it was an amazing game. Here's the thing though, if you don't know anything about, physics and vehicle dynamics, it's going to be really tough to play because you're going to be messing with stuff like the weight of the fuel gauge and everything. It's really weird, right? And it's something, it's kind of nerdy, and you have to have a really vast knowledge of rocket science if you're going to have to play Kerbal Space Program. Now, Celestia and the Universe Sandbox, on the other hand, are pieces of software that you use to explore planets and the different parts of space, right? So here we have Celestia version 1.5, which was the only version we could get running on Windows XP for some sort of reason. Although you could have run 1.6, 1.6.1, 1.6.2, but hey, we are just gonna make do with what we have here. So here you can see that we have terrible graphics. That's because we could not set up the VirtualBox 3D acceleration due to the fact that the disk for the additions wasn't working, right? Because Windows XP 64-bit is actually just a different version of Windows Server 2003. So the thing is, VirtualBox doesn't have drivers for Server 2003. So we had to make do with what we have here, and the thing is, the hardware acceleration is a bit janky on this, but hey, it's fine. This is what the average Joe would have experienced if they installed Celestia on their computers back in the 2000s, right? Because graphics cards were really limited back in the day, and they aren't as good as the RTXs and the GTXs you guys have today, right? So this is what they would have experienced, slightly more or less. As you can see, the planets are really flat, 2D-ish, there's no detailing, but hey, this back in the day was the golden standard because this was revolutionary, right? Revolutionary to the core. As you can see, this is Mars right here, and it's really noticeable. You can see the shadows, you can see the stars, you can see space, everything. This is software revolution, right? Now we're going to go to Jupiter just to show you what Jupiter looks like. Oh wow, that's actually good for a gas giant. That's really nice. As you can see, again, shadows, you can see the different contrast in the shadows. You can see how the lighting and the engine for lighting works with the Jupiter mesh over here. And now we are running into some slight problems again for the second time in the software. That's the sun, if you don't recognize. So yeah, this is an experience, right? Now let's just assume you're a kid and you want to explore space for the purpose of education, or you're just really nerdy and you had free time in the 2000s. You would have experienced Celestia, or Universe Sandbox. But I'm assuming Celestia was more accessible due to its low resource usage. I got contradicted here, but you can see this is because of virtualization. You have some sort of compromises when you're going to be virtualizing such software. So you don't only have the option of exploring planets of the solar system here. You can go beyond the solar system by going to a different star system, right? So in navigation you have the star browser, and look at that, just look at it, right, in its glory. So you can see there are different systems. You have Proxima, you have Sirius A, Sirius B, you have Ross. So yeah, it's the real deal. But here's the thing, like I said, exploring all this is going to be really limited, right? Because again, hardware restrictions, right? The average Joe would want to access such a revolutionary application. But here's the thing, right? Even though you're an enthusiast, you need to be an enthusiast with the hardware, right? You cannot be limited. So that's why this is a more professional grade software right here, right? So if you want to be exploring the application to its fullest, you're going to have the hardware, the necessary hardware, the graphics, the RAM, the CPU, everything, right? So it was a bit of a challenge back in the day. It still would be a challenge for, the average people, but for those who have good graphics and everything, they could explore it. You guys could explore this application on your computer yourself, right? All you have to do is install this application and run it in compatibility mode for Windows XP, and you guys would still have the hardware to be able to run it. So you guys might as well just be able to use the application to its full extent on your system without having to use a virtual machine, because again, it's a Windows application, you can install it. So as you can see here, we're frozen. So yes, we will be faced with troubles such as this. But now that's my cue to leave. Thank you for watching.